Welcome to The Explainer. So, for an incredible 8 years running, the World Happiness Report has crowned exactly one nation as the happiest on Earth, and that is Finland. But honestly, if you know anything at all about this Nordic nation, that statistic might leave you scratching your head just a bit. Today, we're going to unpack the literal secret sauce of happiness. We'll dive deep into sociology, education, and even the raw neuroscience of joy to figure out exactly how the Finns are pulling this off, and more importantly, what we can all learn from it. Now, you've got to wonder, are Finns really that happy? It's a completely fair question. In fact, even a lot of Finns themselves are kind of surprised by this title. But the World Happiness Report isn't just pulling this out of thin air. It's a massive, highly reliable sociological study backed by the UN, and they systematically survey people in over 140 countries, asking them to basically rate their subjective life satisfaction. But to truly understand why Finland's ranking is considered such a paradox, we really have to look at the reality on the ground. Just take a look at the stark contrast here between Finland's environmental realities and its unbeatable life satisfaction. On paper, this does not sound like a tropical paradise of joy. We're talking about freezing, dark winters where temperatures barely hit double digits in the north. We've got historically high rates of alcohol consumption and a sprawling 1,300-kilometer border with Russia that, let's face it, certainly adds a layer of geopolitical anxiety. Yet, despite these incredibly harsh realities, they comfortably hold on to that number one spot. How on earth do they do it? To really put this into perspective, let's look at the actual numbers. When asked to place themselves on a scale from 0, which is the worst possible life, to 10, the best possible life, the average Finnish score comes in at a remarkable 7.7. To give you some context, a wealthy, highly developed nation like Germany sits around a 6.7, so a full point lower. And at the very bottom of the scale, you have Afghanistan. So the Finns are clearly doing something fundamentally right to keep their average that high. And a huge part of it actually starts with a very unique cultural mindset. That mindset is perfectly captured in a deeply ingrained cultural concept they call sisu. Now, sisu doesn't translate perfectly into English, but you can think of it as this kind of psychological armor of just making the best of things. When you're faced with a long, freezing, miserable winter, the sisu response isn't to sit around and complain. It's to say, well, so what? I'll just throw on my long johns. It's an innate, gritty resilience that acts as a literal shield against their harsh climate. And get this, there is actually a dedicated Finnish word for the act of getting drunk at home, alone, in your underwear. It's kalsarikännit. Now, while the underlying alcohol consumption is definitely a real societal issue, this term highlights a really vital part of the Finnish psyche, and that is their self-deprecating humor. They just do not take themselves too seriously. They accept life exactly as it is, flaws and the whole shebang. But of course, quirky words and a tough mindset alone aren't going to build the happiest nation on Earth. The real foundation here is completely systemic. When we compare these systems side by side, we start to see how Finland builds this massive foundation of societal trust. Look, the government can't legally make you happy, right? But it can absolutely remove the baseline anxieties that make you unhappy. And Finland excels at this through incredibly robust social safety nets. We're talking massive trust in institutions, extremely low corruption, and profound equality. For example, parents get guaranteed free daycare starting from age 1. Plus, every new parent receives a comprehensive baby starter kit straight from the state. Compare that to a wealthier nation like Germany. Germany actually has a higher GDP, but it struggles with a much wider gap between rich and poor, and lower overall trust in the government. You know, this focus on equality is probably most visible in their education system. Finnish students actually spend their first 9 years of school all together in the same facilities, totally regardless of their background. And what's truly a game changer is their multi-professional team approach. Teachers are in there working right alongside special education experts and school psychologists. If a kid struggles, they get individualized support instantly, and there is absolutely zero stigma attached to it. Adding completely free basic education and free school lunches for everyone, you create an environment that fosters immense national unity and baseline well-being, literally right from childhood. And that foundational support for kids is absolutely vital, especially when we look at this data. Sociologists have long relied on what they call the U theory of happiness. It basically suggests our life satisfaction follows a U-shaped curve. We start out highly optimistic and happy in our youth, we experience a bit of a dip during that notorious midlife crisis, and then our happiness steadily rises again as we get older. But researchers are starting to see a really worrying trend in places like Germany. This traditional curve, it's breaking. Young people are becoming significantly unhappier, and adolescent depression rates are just spiking. So, the crucial point here is figuring out what might be driving that massive drop in youth happiness. Honestly, what blew my mind is this staggering statistic from a University College London study that tracked nearly 11,000 teenagers. They found that adolescents using social media for over 3 hours a day experienced a massive 20% increase in depressive symptoms, things like insomnia and a complete lack of motivation. When young people lack those robust, built-in emotional support systems like we see in Finnish schools, these intense external pressures can severely damage their well-being. Okay, let's shift our investigation away from society and screens for a minute and zoom right down into our biology. Like, what is actually happening inside our heads when we feel this good? From a neuroscientific perspective, happiness isn't just some vague, floaty concept. It is a very real, highly measurable cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones physically firing in our brains. If we really want to understand how to build happiness, we have to understand the literal biochemistry of joy. Let's rapid fire through the big four happiness chemicals, starting right at the foundation with serotonin. You can basically think of serotonin as the master regulator of your body's overall well-being. It's the neurotransmitter that manages your need for rest, your appetite, your libido, and even your pain perception and memory function. When your serotonin levels are perfectly balanced, you feel this great baseline sense of calm and stability, which, is the exact kind of stability required to weather a pitch-black 6-month winter. Next up is oxytocin, pretty famously known as the cuddle hormone. Produced right in the pituitary gland, this hormone is released during physical affection, sure, but also during moments of deep psychological closeness and trust. And this right here, this perfectly connects back to Finland. The profoundly high levels of societal trust and community connection built into Finnish culture mean they are constantly naturally engaging the biological triggers for oxytocin. Then, of course, we have dopamine, which is essentially the chemical engine of motivation. Dopamine is a core component of your brain's reward system. It's that amazing rush you feel when you finally check off a task on your to-do list, or score a goal, or hit a big milestone. It's actually that exact chemical engine that fuels sisu, driving us forward to just push through obstacles and get things done. And rounding out the big four, we have endorphins. These are literally the body's own natural painkillers. If you've ever experienced a runner's high after a super tough workout, or maybe you've laughed so hard your sides actually hurt, you felt a rush of endorphins. They can induce this opium-like euphoria to numb our pain and flood us with a temporary, intense feeling of joy. Believe it or not, it's the exact chemical rush you get jumping straight into a freezing Finnish lake after a boiling hot sauna. But listen, true happiness isn't just about chasing quick chemical hits. It's about something much, much deeper. And it's captured perfectly by this ancient Aristotelian concept, eudaimonia. Roughly translated as good spirit, eudaimonia goes way beyond fleeting pleasures. It is that profound, long-term sense of contentment and peace you feel when your life is truly in balance. It's knowing exactly who you are, having a clear purpose, and accepting your circumstances, which, again, sounds a whole lot like the Finnish mindset, doesn't it? Now, you might be wondering, are the Finns just biologically lucky? Like, are they born with better brain chemistry? Well, researchers have actually looked into this, using extensive twin studies to isolate our DNA, and they found that exactly 40% of our happiness baseline is dictated by genetics. But here is the absolute kicker. There is no specific Finnish happiness gene. We all share the same genetic lotteries. That leaves a massive 60%, yes, a full 60% of our happiness entirely up to our environment and trainable factors that we actually have control over. So how do we actually optimize that 60%? Sociologist Jan Delhay broke it down into an incredibly practical formula. Have, love, be. Think of it like this. First, you need to have basic material wealth, food and shelter, just to remove that baseline survival anxiety. Second, you need to love, meaning you need deep social connections, family and friends. And third, you need to be, which means having fulfilling work, engaging hobbies, and good health. While studies definitely show that having more money does generally increase happiness, it is only one pillar. Without community and personal fulfillment, wealth alone is never going to get you to true eudaimonia. And the Finns absolutely nail the be and love pillars through their complete devotion to nature. Get this, a staggering 97% of Finns state that nature makes them happy. And to be fair, they have a lot of it. 70% of the entire country is forest, dotted with 188,000 lakes, all with incredibly low population density. But this isn't just about having pretty scenery to look at. Studies from the Natural Resources Institute show that spending regular time in these forests physically lowers blood pressure, reduces asthma, and actively protects the human brain against depression. It's medicine. Let's pull all these threads together now, because this is probably the most empowering takeaway from the entire science of the Finnish Paradox. Thanks to neuroplasticity, which is our brain's amazing ability to rewire itself, happiness is actually a trainable skill. Seriously. When researchers hook subjects up to an EEG and ask them to vividly recall positive memories, the brain immediately floods with alpha waves, which indicates deep relaxation and joy. By actively practicing gratitude, cultivating warm social connections, and spending time out in nature, you are literally reshaping the neural pathways in your brain to default to happiness. And the ultimate state of that beautifully trained brain is flow, that magical, almost addictive feeling of becoming entirely one with an activity, where time just seems to slip away. Whether it's playing an instrument, running in the woods, or simply laughing with friends, finding your personal flow is the key to unlocking your own 60%. So, as we wrap up this explainer on the secrets of Finland, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to reflect on today. What is it that brings you into a state of flow?